Welcome to week 6 of Mpai 600 here at Georgetown University School of Continuing Studies Applied Intelligence Program. You'll have to forgive me if you weren't in the Zoom session. You probably know that, or I had some dental work and I'm in a little bit of pain, so if I start sounding a little weird during this session, just attribute it to that. So, week 6, again, paper 2 is due now, yesterday, tonight, depending on when you're watching this. No extension, so no excuses on getting it late. And then we had a pretty good Zoom session on Thursday. All three groups had pretty good presentations. If you missed it, I apologize. There's nothing we can do at this point, but I think it was a good understanding of the paper 2 requirements and the assignment there. So good job, groups 1, 2, and 3 going forward. So review of week 5, and again, I know that it's hard to do the paper and the week 5 assignments, but that's kind of the nature of the beast if we have a 7.5 week compressed program. So again, a couple of questions. When does radicalization deserve further scrutiny? Let me put it another way. If I'm searching on an ISIS website from the privacy of my own home, do I get further scrutiny? Do I get put on some sort of watch list because I'm doing that? If you don't think so, let's raise the bar a little. Let's say I like or I subscribe to Anwar al-Awlaki's website. Do I now deserve further scrutiny? Do I get put on a list then? What happens if I interact with an ISIS chat room or interact in email, just like Nidal Hassan did, the Fort Hood shooter? Then do I just get further scrutiny? So tell me where along this chain I deserve further scrutiny, where I'm not compromising somebody's civil rights and I'm not going to like a China-like scenario where I'm being monitored constantly. What do we do for people on the radar? This is a key question. You saw in the EU documentary that one of the issues was, those folks doing the Beklan Theater attack, they were on the radar of law enforcement. Those names were known to law enforcement. But two issues. One, you can't arrest everyone. They haven't done enough to get arrested or detained. And two, we don't live like Crockett and Tubbs. And if you don't know who Crockett and Tubbs is, maybe I'm dating myself, but that's Miami Vice for those of us who spent our youths on Thursday night watching TV. But it's not like Crockett and Tubbs where you can just follow people 24 hours a day. That's not realistic. So what do? We know the names. We know they might have had some travel history. Maybe they're one of the people that are radicalized that we talked about in the earlier bullet. What do we do now? Do we have the appropriate funding, structures, and people? This is to talk about the 9/11 case studies, talk about the post 9/11 case studies, talk about this current lone wolf, radicalized right-wing extremist, which is the threat now. Do we have the appropriate funding, structures, and people? And maybe we should just accept it. In a free society that, in some cases fetishizes gun ownership, should we just accept that there is going to be Orlandos and Sandy Hooks and lone wolf attacks like in El Paso or the Jewish Center in Pittsburgh? Maybe that's just the price we pay for living in what we perceive as a free society. I would be interesting if someone could come up with a wordage to talk about that in detail, but that is another consideration as well. So that covers, again, week 5. If you didn't watch the documentaries for some reason because you were in a group assignment or you were doing your paper, please do. All the documentaries are excellent and they're very, very well done. So week 6, criminal intelligence. So this is geared towards law enforcement and law enforcement, or legal enforcement, I should say, or law enforcement intelligence. So you have the Lemieux lecture. So our program director, if you haven't met him, his expertise is in criminology. So I kicked it over to him to talk about criminal intelligence. And then you have CompStat, And the question to lead to, I want you to start thinking about as you're doing the readings, is what led to the decline in crime. For those of you who are not old enough, 70s and 80s, there was massive crime. I mean, you might hear about it, what you see in the news, and maybe there's been a small spike in it over the summer, but it far pales to what we saw in New York and major cities in the late 70s and 80s. And since the late 80s, early 90s, you could see any chart, and you'll see in the readings, crime has, decline is probably not the right term. It's pretty much gone off a cliff compared to what we saw beforehand, statistically anyway. And again, ignore what you see in the day-to-day news and the 24-hour media. Crime it is much safer now than in the last 30, 40 years in American and even most Western society. And the question is why? Why did that decline occur? And we'll examine that in this study. But I just want to tell you that one of the theories that gets bandied around is that better policing, better law enforcement, broken windows, which is a theory that says that we incarcerate people for minor crimes, and if you put someone in jail for turnstile hopping or minor drug crimes, then that leads to less murders and rapes and assault. That's a theory that explains kind of mass incarceration in the 1990s. And that theory, you can trace that theory to more aggressive law enforcement, more aggressive policing, more mass incarceration. And you draw that line all the way to the protests in the post-George Floyd killing and what we saw over the summer and what we continue to see going forward now. So you're going to read about it in the abstract and in the theoretical phases, but those decisions and those policies had real-life impacts on people's lives and caused human suffering. And I'm going to ask you as graduate students to have an understanding of the trade-offs between those types of policies. And I also just want you to think it's quite possible, and I kind of agree with this, that the decline in crime, the Rudy Giuliani's of the world will say the decline in crime was because of those things, because of broken windows, because of mass incarceration. There could be many other factors for the decline in crime other than that. And that's something I want you to think about as you do this week's readings. And then we'll go into law enforcement technologies. We're going to do a documentary on the Boston Marathon bombing. So last week we talked about the intelligence failure related to the Boston Marathon. This week we're going to do the post-investigative technologies used to get the Tsarnaev brothers, to identify them and actually arrest them. And the question to ask as you go through the documentary is, one, how applicable it is. A lot of the technologies that you're going to see only can be used if it's a high-profile crime. We're not going to be doing that for purse grabbers and low-level crime. But ask yourself, can they be mass implemented? Could CCTV, closed-circuit TV, be mass implemented? Could other technologies be mass implemented? And will that lead to a decline in crime without impacting our civil liberties? Things to consider as you go through this week's readings documentaries. So if there's questions or issues, let me know, and I look forward to this week's discussion.